third Otero Family History Podcast, where we discuss the history of the Otero family of Tubac, Arizona, Arizona history, and touch on genealogy research tips to further your own family history research. Today is Sunday, February 19th, 2017. I'm your host, Diana DeLugan, Otero family historian. This broadcast is coming from my home office in Metro Phoenix near the South Mountain Radio Towers. If you are near Metro Phoenix, lords and ladies can attend the family-centric fun-filled Arizona Renaissance Festival. It's open every Saturday and Sunday until April 2nd at Go Canyon. A real treat for all history buffs, the annual festival is one of the area's most anticipated entertainment events. The venue hosts a 13-stage theater, arts and crafts fair, 30-acre circus, and much more. Contact 520-463-2600 for more information or visit arizona.renfestinfo.com on the web. On this third Otero Family History Podcast, first we'll browse Arizona headlines 100 years ago today to rediscover our collective past. Second, we'll touch on a useful genealogy resource and research tip provided through the collaborative efforts of the University of Arizona, the Arizona Historical Society at Tucson, and the Arizona State Library, Archives, and Public Records. It's called Arizona-Sonora Documents Online. This will be followed by a brief segment on Otero family history titled, Who Murdered Fernando Otero? We'll wrap up today's show with an Arizona history moment on the Camels of Arizona. There's a lot to talk about, so let's dive right in. "100 years ago today, Arizona headlines read, Tempe believes deeper motive than has been disclosed was behind murder of Steve Hughes. The body of a reclusive man known as Steve Hughes was discovered buried in a Tempe ditch a mere 50 yards from his home on February 18, 1917. Hughes had been a resident of Tempe, Arizona for 27 years prior to his untimely death. Authorities say Hughes was actually murdered on December 3, 1916. His associate, John Groff, was detained in El Paso, Texas by law enforcement authorities and transported back to Arizona to answer for his actions. Known also as George Harmon, John Groff allegedly confessed to his crime. Had Groff been successful, he schemed to dispose of Hughes' property and pocket the cash once Steve Hughes was dead. With the world still at war, a second Arizona headline on February 19, 1917 read, German submarine sinks 4 auxiliary cruisers within 24 hours. According to Lloyd's shipping agency, the British steamship Worcestershire, steamship Valdez, and steamship Romsdalen were among the vessels destroyed. In total, 6 steamers and 1 sailing vessel were sunk on February 13, 1917, totaling 25,000 tons. This was a huge loss for the British, deeply lamented by its U.S. ally. Back on the continental U.S., the 64th Congress was feverishly working on the enactment of revenue and national defense legislation before leaving for their scheduled break. Also under congressional review was the Post Office Appropriation Bill and the passage of railroad legislation. Well, that was a glimpse of Arizona headlines 100 years ago today. On this week's Genealogy Corner, I want to share with you an important resource called Arizona-Sonora Documents Online. This website is a collaborative effort by the University of Arizona, the Arizona Historical Society at Tucson, and the Arizona State Library, Archives, and Public Records. This excellent resource contains historically important full-view documents from the 19th and 20th centuries. Funded by a grant from the Institute of Museum and Library Services to the University of Arizona Library, the Arizona-Sonora Collections covers a broad range of topics, including land grants, mining, ranching, governmental issues, and crime on the border. One major limitation of this collection is that you cannot execute a full-text search to whittle down your research focus. Although reviewing the documents online may be painstakingly slow, research can be profitable for the patient at heart. To access the Arizona-Sonora documents online collection, visit content.library.arizona.edu/collections/ASDO/. Once you arrive at the site, you can begin your own genealogy or family history research by clicking under the main menu located at the top left of the website and select Search All of ASDO, or you can conduct a narrower search by clicking on the Browse the Collections link to select a more refined topic. It's time for our segment on Otero family history. This week we'll discuss who murdered Fernando Otero. Fernando Otero was the middle son of Manuel and Maria Clara Otero of Tubac. He was born around April or May of 1860. According to the census of free inhabitants of the Arizona Territory of New Mexico, Fernando was only 4 months old when the census was taken at Tubac on September 10, 1860. After his father's death in 1870, Fernando was raised by his mother Clara, sisters, and 26-year-old brother Sabino. Fernando was a handsome young man, sporting a neatly trimmed mustache and impeccably dressed. Like his more well-known brother Sabino, Fernando had business ambitions and sought out his own fortune to carve out a name for himself. Arizona Historical Society records report he issued notice to homestead 160 acres known as Rio Venton, possibly a corruption of the branch historically known as Reventon, north of Tubac. The Florence Land Office also reports he claimed a homestead, but lost it over a land dispute. As the cattle industry began to wane due to severe drought and overgrazing, Fernando shifted his focus to the mining industry. On March 13, 1881, Fernando filed a mining claim at the Pima County Recorder's Office for a mining site at the Santa Rita Mountains near Tubac. Family oral history reports that Fernando lived with his siblings until the turn of the 20th century. Then, the unspeakable happened. On September 25, 1901, Sheriff A. V. Lewis issued a summons for 9 jurors to gather under the authority of the District Court for the First Judicial District for the County of Cochise and determine the cause of death for the body of a Mexican found dead. This inquest, led by Coroner Chas S. Clark, was to determine the cause of death for the body identified as Fernando Otero. Inquest jurors included Peter Connor, Andy Griffin, Robert Todd, John Wilson, and S. P. Gallen. The primary witness at the inquest was N. E. Holmes, manager of the Exposed Reef Mining Company, who testified that Fernando had been working for the mining company as a laborer. During the early morning of February 24, 1901, Fernando was dispatched to retrieve a wagon wheel at the mining company storehouse located at the foot of the Hill Carro Canyon, Huachuca Mountain, in Cochise County, Arizona. Unfortunately, Fernando never returned. Mr. Holmes discovered Fernando's lifeless body sprawled across the Exposed Reef Mining Company's own road on the following afternoon around 2:45 p.m. Unaware of his assailant, Fernando was shot from the back. The fatal bullet entered Fernando to the right of the backbone, about 1 1/2 to 2 inches, moving in an upward trajectory until it passed through his body out of the right side of the sternum bone exiting about 4 inches below the arch of the areola on the right portion of his breastbone. On November 6, 1901, inquest jurors unanimously held that Fernando Otero was indeed murdered. The Exposed Reef Mining Company was incorporated on September 11 of 1899. 1 year after Fernando's murder in 1901, a second man, John Powell, was murdered at the Exposed Reef Mine. 2 murders, 2 years. At Fernando's crime scene, there was no evidence of a struggle. It appeared that his body had been rolled over after his murder, suggesting the killer needed to verify his identity. This was not simply a robbery gone wrong. Fernando carried from $30 to $80 on his person and was still wearing a new gold watch from a Montgomery Warding Company ad. Brothers Savino and Teofilo apparently lost all contact with Fernando. His whereabouts were unknown even after his death. Fernando Otero's murder remains an unsolved Arizona mystery. Okay, it's time for our Arizona History Moment. Last week, we celebrated the anniversary of Arizona statehood. Today's Arizona History Moment occurred on November 20, 1879. It was on this day, Governor of Arizona Territory, J.C. Fremont, issued a report to the U.S. Secretary of the Interior, which included a report on the Camels of Arizona. Yes, you heard right, the Camels of Arizona. Governor Fremont said the U.S. War Department imported a number of camels from Smyrna, Asia Minor, in 1855. Intended for use to transport military supplies from California throughout Arizona, several of the camels were lost or strayed around Agua Caliente, about 75 miles east of the Colorado River. Some of the camels from California were reassigned to transport ores from the Silver King mine in Arizona. Freighters and teamsters were vehemently opposed to use of the camels for transport. This resulted in releasing the band of camels somewhere between the Gila and Colorado rivers. Later, about 9 camels were captured by Papago Indians and turned over to a circus, and eventually grew to a band of 20 camels. It was estimated that approximately 7 camels were in the mountains and hills east of Yuma and Harquahala wagon roads. In the governor's report, he suggested that the camels be rounded up and be removed to a national park like Yellowstone or the Zoological Gardens in Washington City. The Honorable Hokie Smith, U.S. Secretary of the Interior, recommended in 1894 that the Arizona camels be sent to some national park. The notable author Rudyard Kipling wrote a book titled Beast and Man in India, a popular sketch of Indian animals in their relations with the people. Published in 1891 by Macmillan and Company, Kipling spoke of Indian camels in Arizona. Quote, "The deliberate movement of the beasts under the burdens is impressive, and not without a touch of scornful majesty. Only an Oriental, one would think, would accommodate himself to that unhasting cadence of step. Perhaps the reported existence of wild camels in Arizona is a fabulous or jocular illustration of American character. It is said they were imported into that state to serve as pack animals, but nobody foresaw that the nervous, electric American was the last man alive to pace placidly at the end of a camel's nose rope. He naturally dropped it in disgust, and now there are wild camels in Arizona. If this story is not true, it ought to be." Close quote. Before I go, here's my takeaway from today's podcast. Today we learned about several murders committed during Arizona's pre-statehood era. Whether murder was committed as an act of vengeance, greed, or some other motivation, Our Arizona judicial system had to evolve to protect future generations. Laws are intended to protect citizens and maintain peace within our communities. Unfortunately, crime is never victimless. For those like me in search of family history, we have to balance the right to know. When you conduct your own family history research, don't forget to research criminal cases, coroner records, probate cases, and medical records. On occasion, these historical records might disclose family secrets that some may wish to conceal due to perceived embarrassing facts. But remember, if records obtained report actual events that occurred, sometimes this delicate information can also bring peace of mind to grieving families. It is horrible to be kept in the dark for years, not knowing what became of loved ones. Case in point, in our Otero family, what happened to Fernando Otero was a mystery for more than a century. He was someone who simply faded into the unknown, a once-loved family member lost to time. Because records have been released due to the expiration of copyright and public domain records are more easily accessible, what happened to the unfortunate Fernando Otero was finally discovered. Well, that's all for today. Please join in on the conversation. Your thoughts are important to me. Feel free to comment or subscribe to this podcast. Thanks for listening. This is Diana DeLugan, Otero family historian, signing off. Hasta la próxima.